Today's daf is Chulin daf Kuf Tes, and we are 13 lines from the bottom of daf Kuf Ches Amid Beis. Ve'efshar l'soichdoi atzmoi tanoi. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Shlomo ben Chayaleah and Yisrael ben Adin. So yesterday we learned the very epic Chulin daf Kuf Ches, which discusses a tipas chalav that falls on top of a chatichas basar. The Mishnah said, tipas chalav shenafla ala chaticha, a tip of chalav that fell on top of a chaticha, im yeshba benoisam tam ba'usa chaticha aser. If there's enough chalav to be noisin tam in the chaticha, aser, it's going to be aser. In other words, if there isn't 60 times of basar to the tipas chalav, then the chalav is not bottled to the basar. You have a taruvos of basar v'chalav, and as a result, it's going to be aser. The Gemara brought Rav's addendum to the Mishnah, which stated that when the Mishnah says that in the event that the tipas chalav is able to be noisin tam into the chatichas basar aser, what it means is not just that chatichas basar is going to be aser, but rather all the basar in the entire kedera is going to be basar. And the reason is because Rav holds that once the tipas chalav makes the basar aser, chaticha atzma nasas nevela. We view the iser moving forward as being not only the tipas chalav that's in the chatichas basar, but rather the entire basar is now considered in it of itself a cheftza of iser. Additionally, Rav holds mim b'minoi loy batal shitas Rabbi Yehuda. It's for that reason, says Rav, that when the Mishnah says tipas chalav shenafla ala chaticha im yeshba benoisen tam ba'usa chaticha aser, aser means not only that chaticha, but aser means the entire kedei. Because once the tipas chalav makes the chatichas basar aser, because of the fact that there wasn't shishim times basar keneged the tipas chalav, well now I see not only a tipas chalav of iser, but I have a chatichas basar of iser as well. That chatichas basar has the ability to aser to the extent that it comes in contact with additional basar, mim b'minei batal, it will make it aser regardless of how much additional basar there is. Meaning, even if you have 60 times additional basar in the ketera connected that one chatichas iser, the halach is mim b'minei batal, it's all going to be aser. So when the Mishnah says aser, it means not only the chatichas basar, but all the basar in the ketera. And you don't have to make any cheshbainis of how much basar is there in the ketera relative to this one chatichas basar, because it doesn't matter. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds mimba midalai batal, Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. He's making the Mishnah libid to Rabbi Yehuda, and it's for that reason once the chatichas basar becomes aser, then all the basar in the ketera is going to be aser. And again, we mentioned that really this pirish in the Mishnah is predicated on two chidushim. Number one, the concept of chaticha atzma nasan vela. Number two, mimba midalai batal. If you didn't have chaticha atzma nasan vela, you would never have basar of iser. All you would have is chalav of iser. Even if you have chaticha atzma nasan vela, but if you don't have mimba midalai batal, you can't unequivocally state that all the basar in the ketera is going to be aser, because what if the shishim times heter keneged the iser? But being the chaticha atzma nasas nevelo, so now it's not just the tipas chalav that's aser, but the basar itself is aser, and mimba midilai batal. So it doesn't matter how much basar of heter you have, the little bit of basar iser will always make that basar aser. The halacha would be that tipas chalav shenafla ala chaticha im yeshba benoisen tam ba'usa chaticha, in all situations, aser is going to be aser. The Gemara said on the bottom of Daf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph that really this chiddush of Rav is based on a big machlokes amayra with regards to efshel l'soichdai or aser or efshel l'soichdai mutter. So what does that mean? In English, what it means is, what happens if you have a chatichas basar, lamashal, that has in it a bli of iser, and then you take that chatichas basar and you cook it together with other basar or with whatever. Efshel l'soichdai mutter states that we assume that blia gets released from the original piece of meat that it was balua in, and now it disperses itself equally amongst everything that's in the ketera. So assuming the 60 times in the ketera keneged that one blia, the halach is it's going to be mutter. Efshel l'soichtei aser says that no. Once there's a blia that's entrenched into a chatichas basar, you can cook it v'nheim bismargin. It's never going to be released, and as a result, even if the 60 times in the Ketera can negate that blia, it's still going to remain aser. The Gemara says that bishloima, if you hold efshel l'soichtei aser, I understand shitas Rav. The whole Rav is predicated on, I have a tipas chalav that landed on a chatichas basar. I then was ma'ariv that chatichas basar with the rest of the Ketera. We say chaticha atzma nasas nevela min b'minu loy batel. The entire Ketera is going to be aser. Well, if you hold efshel l'soichtei aser, that makes sense. If you hold, however, efshel l'soichtei mutter, then this whole concept of chaticha atzma nasas nevela is dead on arrival. It doesn't even get onto first base, because the minute you take the chatichas basar and you ma'ariv it together with the Ketera, the tipas cholav that's inside gets released. Now it's dispersed equally amongst all the other meat that's inside the Ketera, and assuming the shishim times connected, then everything should be mutter. From the fact that Rav said that chaticha atzma nasas nevela, it's clearly presupposing efshel l'soichtei aser. Now, as we spoke about in yesterday's shir, just because you hold efshel l'soichtei aser doesn't mean you have to hold chaticha atzma nasas nevela. Efshel l'soichtei aser means that tipas chalav is going to remain in the chatichas basar even after you ma'ariv it within the rest of the Ketera. That doesn't necessarily mean that when you are ma'ariv it and you're cheshbening the isser relative to the heter, that the way you cheshben the isser is based on the entire chaticha. Maybe you only cheshben it based on the tipa that remained inside the chaticha. Rav holds chaticha atzma nasas nevela. Efshel l'soichtei aser doesn't beget chaticha atzma nasas nevela. But you don't have chaticha atzma nasas nevela if efshel l'soichtei is mutter. Because if efshel l'soichtei is mutter, then we assume that little bit of chalav left the chaticha. So forget about chaticha atzma nasas nevela. You don't even have the sibis or isser anymore inside that chaticha to even get to the point where you would say, oh, because I have the sibis or isser and I don't have enough to be mevatel, so therefore chaticha atzma nasas nevela. So the Gemara said that l'chura Rav's halach of chaticha atzma nasas nevela is totally in the machloikis of efshel mutter efshel l'soichtei aser. Rav would only seem to shtim if you hold efshel l'soichtei aser, and the Gemara said true. In fact, it's Rav l'shitasa. Rav shita happens to be the efshel l'soichtei aser. L'shitasa, he holds his halacha of chaticha atzma nasas nevela. Either way, that's the part of daf kuf ches that we need in order to learn the first part of daf kuf tes. So again, 13 lines from the bottom of Daf Kuf Ches Amid Beis, and this is really part 2 of the sugya of efshel l'soichtei, of the sugya of chaticha atzma nasas nevela. Says the Gemara, the efshel l'soichtei atzma tanoi. This machloikis amoyroim that we just mentioned, efshel l'soichtei aser, efshel l'soichtei mutter, you should know is not only a machloikis amoyroim, it's a machloikis tanom as well. Truth is, just in terms of the names of the Amiram, just to reacquaint, so the Gemara in the bottom of Kuf Ches Amud Aleph said, Rav v'Rab Chanina v'Rab Yochanan da Amri efshel l'soichtei aser, Shmuel v'Rab Shimon ben Rebbe v'Reish Lakish da Amri efshel l'soichtei mutter. So these are Gedolei Amiram, stating that they're Amiram. So the Gemara now says that this Machlokes Amiram is really a Machlokes Tanam. Now, the Gemara is not going to bring a mafurish Machlokes Tanam where you find that this Tana held efshel l'soichtei aser and that Tana held efshel l'soichtei mutter. What the Gemara is going to bring is a brisa, a little bit of a cryptic brisa. There are more cryptic brises in Shas, but it's a little bit cryptic, and the Gemara is going to back into what probably is the machlokes going on in this brisa. Efshel l'soichtei aser, efshel l'soichtei mutter. Hence, says the Gemara, this machlokes amiram, which we said shitas Rav of Chanan is Chulin, is really not only a machlokes amiram, but it's a machlokes tanam as well. Says the Gemara, the Tanya, what's this brisa? Tipas chalav shenaf ala chaticha. Again, a tipas chalav fell on top of the chaticha. If the tipas chalav is able to be nice and tam in the chaticha, meaning you don't have 60 times of chaticha relative to the tipas chalav, chaticha atzma nasas nevela, the chaticha itself is going to become a nevela, v'iseres kol chaticha is kulan, and it's going to answer all the chatichas mipnei shehimina, because the other chatichas are the same min as this one chaticha. Once this chaticha becomes aser, so now it would answer all the other minim, because min b'mina loy batel divrei Rabbi Yehuda azay halt Rabbi Yehuda. If you think about it, Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa is literally verbatim Rav. In fact, Rav seems to literally be saying what Rabbi Yehuda said. Just look at the words. Tipas cholav shenafla ala chaticha kivin shenas natam bechaticha hachaticha atzma nasan avelo. Literally chanan. Vayiseres kol hachaticha is kulam b'nei shein mina mim b'mina lay batel. Both chedushim of Rav. Number one, chaticha atzma nasan avelo. Number two, mim b'mina lay batel is mefurish over here in Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. Another thing that's worth mentioning, and that is that who is the Tana? It's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the Shita that holds mim b'mina lay batel, and Kemuvan it's Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasa. Says the Gemara. Moving along in the Brayso, the Chachamim say achetitin tam beroitiv ubekipa ubechatichos. The halach is this tipas chalav that fell on the chaticha. The only time it would make the chaticha aser is if it was able to be nice and tam, not only in the chaticha, but in the roitev and in the kippah and in all the chatichas. Meaning, if there's not enough chalav to be nice and tam into the entire pot, then the halach is it's not going to be aser. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, as long as it's able to be nice and tam in the chaticha, the entire pot becomes aser. Because it's nice and tam in the chaticha atzma nasas nevela, middelay bottle, everything becomes aser. According to the Chachamim, it has to be able to be nice and tam in the entire kedera. If it can't be nice and tam in the entire kedera, it's going to be mutter. My Rabbi said, I want to be machriya. Nir and divi Rabbi Yehuda b'shaloi nir v'shaloi kisa. I feel that Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda, that we look at whether the tipas chalav is able to be nice and tam in the chaticha, not in the entire pot. In a case where you were loy nir, you didn't mix the pot, v'loi kisa, or you didn't cover the pot. But I hold like the Chachamim b'shenir v'kisa. In the event that you mix the pot or you cover the pot. So nir v'kisa, as it relates to this sugya, accomplishes the same thing. It mixes everything together. Nir by definition means to mix, and kisa, when you cover the pot, that creates a mixing of all the contents that's in the pot. So says Rabbi, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda, if you didn't mix. If you didn't mix, so then the tipas chalav that falls on the chaticha is only going to become balua in the chaticha. So if you want to figure out whether there's bittul or not, you have to look at the chalav relative to the chaticha relative to the chalav. If it's nice and tam, it becomes aser. Chanan, mim b'midulei batel, the entire ketera is going to be aser. If you were near v'kisa, so then it's not the chalav versus the chaticha, but rather it's the chalav versus all the contents in the ketera. So at that point, if it's able to be nice and tamit in the entire ketera, it's going to be aser. If it's not able to be nice and tamit in the entire ketera, it's going to be mutter. Says the Gemara. So again, Rebbe was machriya between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rebbe, it depends whether you're near v'kisa or whether you loy near v'loy kisa. The next part of the Gemara, which is the first avodah of the Gemara's analysis of this brayso, is going to be to try to give definitions to what Rebbe meant when he said near v'kisa, loy near v'kisa. Because again, near in divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'shloy near v'loy kisa, v'divrei Chachamim b'shenir v'kisa. So we have to know what does it mean loy near v'loy kisa, and what does it mean near v'kisa. Says the Gemara, my loy near v'loy kisa. What did Rebbe mean when he said near in divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'shloy near v'loy kisa? Ilay near klal v'loy kisa klal. Did he mean that I hold like Rabbi Yehuda in a situation where he was loy near klal v'loy kisa klal, meaning where the tipas challah fell on top of the chaticha and there was no near at all and there was no kisoy at all? Well, if that's the case, freit the Gemara, mifla bala, mifla loy palat. If that's the case, that means the chaticha's basa was bayleya from the tipas chalav that fell on it. But being that you were loy near v'loy kisa, so you never went ahead and you were never maflet. If that's the case, so why should the halacha be near in divrei Rabbi Yehuda? Why would Rabbi Yehuda even say as halacha that all the chatichas are going to be aser? If you were never minared and you were never mechaset, if there was never any mixing between this chaticha and all the other chatichas, how could all the other chatichas be aser? The only way the other chatichas could be aser is because they somehow mixed with each other. If they didn't mix with each other, so how in the world are they going to be aser? Rabbi Yehuda can hold chanan from today till tomorrow, and he can hold mimba minulay batel from today till tomorrow. But if the chaticha that has the chalav never mixes with the other chatichas, there's no way for it to go ahead and aser. So you can't say that Rebbe says nir and divrei Rabbi Yehuda v'loy niv like kisa klal, because if it's like niv like kisa klal, there's no way for it to be maflet into the rest of the ketera. There's no way for it to be aser. Hello. You have to say that what Rebbe probably meant was loy nir b'tchila ela b'sayf. He wasn't minayir l'chatchila. Meaning, as soon as the tipas chalav fell, he did not immediately go ahead and mix it. But lebesoif, he did mix it. The same is true for kisoy, ela lebesoif. And it's over there that Rebbe is saying that being that ultimately you were menayer and mechasa, but you didn't do it mamish lechatchila, Therefore, I hold the chaticha becomes aser, and then it goes ahead and asers everything else. Again, being that you were not menayer mitchila, so therefore the tipa asers the chaticha, assuming that there's no shishim in the chaticha keneged the tipa. Why don't you cheshben all the contents of the ketera? Because you were like near betchila, so it only went into the chaticha. So the face-off is between the tipa and the chaticha, not the tipa and the rest of the ketera. However, you are menayer lebesayif, and being you menayer lebesayif, so that the chaticha was able to mix together with the rest of the ketera, and it's for that reason the halach is, chanan, the rest of the chatichas are going to be aser. Says the Gemara, okay. Says the Gemara, but I still don't understand 100%. Why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, would it be aser? Habala v'hapalat. At the end of the day, once you go ahead and you menayer this chaticha l'besayif together with the rest of the ketera, why don't we say that the tipas chalav comes out, and when the tipas chalav comes out, now it equally disperses to the rest of the ketera, and if that's the case, as long as the shishim and the ketera to be mevatel the tipas chalav, it should be aser. Why are we saying that the chaticha remains aser after you go ahead and you're menayer it, even if you are menayer it? Why don't we say that now that you mixed it, so that's like a second bishul, so to speak, that should be maflip to tipas chalav, which should equally disperse into the rest of the ketera. It's not a mimba mina, it's a mimba she'enai mina, and as long as you have shishim times keneged, it should be mutter. Says the Gemara, must be kasava efshel l'sayich yaser. The reason has to be because Rabbi Yehuda must hold that efshel l'soichta is aser, and being that efshel l'soichta is aser, so therefore, even if you menayer it later, but at the end of the day, the tipas chalav never fully comes out, and he also has chaticha atzmanasas leveil, and he also has mimah minulei batos. For that reason, the entire kedera is going to be aser. But from the fact that Rebbe said near in Divi Rabbi Yehuda, and it must mean that means even when you are menayer lebesayif, still Rabbi Yehuda's halacha is going to be in effect. Why? Why don't you say that once you menayer lebesayif, it's efshel l'sayich mutter? It must be because he also efshel l'sayich yaser. He rather also holds chanan and min b'niloi batal like Rav on Amud Aleph. But the point is that you see clearly Rabbi Yehuda must be of the opinion of efshel l'sayich yaser, which, by the way, even though the Gemara is going to go weiter, but if you just want to come up for breath for a second, this is half the equation of the ketanoi. The Gemara is trying to prove ketanoi that there's a machlokes tanam in this price of whether efshel l'sayich yaser, efshel l'sayich mutter. From Rebbe's comment in Rabbi Yehuda, you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda holds efshel l'sayich yaser. But the Gemara goes further. The Gemara is medayik. What did Rabbi say? Nir in divrei Rabbi Yehuda, b'shaloi nir v'loi kisa. It implies that Rabbi Yehuda said his halacha in a more extreme case. Rebbe is just saying, I hear Rabbi Yehuda, I'm maskim to Rabbi Yehuda, where it was le'nir, v'le'kisa, which the Gemara clarified, le'nir betchila v'nir b'sayf. But Rabbi Yehuda said his halacha even in a more extreme case than that. So the Gemara says, Mechlal Rabbi Yehuda savar, from the fact that Rebbe is only hearing Rabbi Yehuda in this case, that means Rabbi Yehuda said his halacha even in a more extreme case. What is that more extreme case? You see from here that Rabbi Yehuda must hold kinir mitchila v'ad sayf, v'kisa mitchila v'ad sayf. Even if you were menayer mitchila v'ad sayf, or you were mechasim mitchila v'ad sayf, aser, even in that case, it's going to be aser. Now, there's Rebbe saying, if you were near betchila, but you were near besayf, that's right here, Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Yehuda holds even in a bigger case. What's the bigger case? Where you were menayer betchila, and you were menayer besayf. Again, if you were near betchila v'loy besayf, that extreme case, the halach is nothing would be aser, right? Just the chaticha would be aser, but the rest of the ketera wouldn't be aser. So, the only time it's even a geyer, Rabbi Yehuda, is where you were menayer. Rabbi says, I hear it when you were not menayer betchila, you were only menayer besayf, which implies Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if you were menayer betchila and you were menayer besayf, but the Gemara says, Amai, halei bala klal, what's Pash Pshat in that? If you were menayer at betchila, so as soon as the tipas chalav landed on the chaticha, you quickly were menayer, so at that point, whatever landed on the chaticha immediately got mixed with everything else. So why don't you say you immediately mixed it, and it should be mutter as long as the shishim and the ketera can negate the tipas chalav? Why would Rabbi Yehuda hold efshel l'sayich aser, chanan, mivim midulei batal? If you were in menayer right away, it shouldn't be a problem. And by the way, that was the seif of the Mishnah. The seif of the Mishnah on Kuf Chesam and Aleph was near sakteira, myesh ba benoisim tam ba oisik ketera aser. We were menayer mitchila, so then the halach is we look at the tipa relative to the ketera. So why would Rabbi Yehuda? I understand Rabbi doesn't like Rabbi Yehuda's extreme application of his halacha. But what's Pashup Shana Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara says a balabatish, a teretz, because ema loy near yafa yafa v'loy kisa yafa yafa. The reason Rabbi Yehuda held that is because Rabbi Yehuda was concerned that maybe even the person that was menayer mitchila, he wasn't menayer at yafa yafa, or he wasn't mechas at yafa yafa. Therefore, he thinks he was menayer, but he really wasn't menayer. And if he wasn't menayer, then if this shishim or less than shishim in the chaticha becomes aser. Efshel l'soichtay aser. Chaticha atzma nasas nevela, midilay bottle, and therefore it has to all be aser. Meaning, if you knew for sure that the person was menar yafa and chinami, conceptually, but Rabbi Yehuda has a gzeir. Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that maybe you are menar yafa, and therefore even when you were near betchila b'soif, it's keilu you were loy near betchila, elo near b'soif, and it's for that reason Rabbi Yehuda holds even in that case it's going to be aser. What does Rebbe hold? Rebbe holds near in Divri Rabbi Yehuda where you have mefurish loy near betchila el near lebesayf. But where you are near betchila ubesayf, he's not worried shema loy near yafa shema loy kisa yafa, and it's for that reason Rebbe holds in that case I'm not taking on Rabbi Yehuda's halacha. Or b'milam acherim, Rebbe holds be'etzem like Rabbi Yehuda. Rebbe holds efshel l'soich deyasner chaticha atzma nasas nevela min b'midei batal. He just holds that if you were near betchila besayf, so the tipas chalav immediately got dispersed amongst the entire Ketera. Rabbi Yehuda has another shita, another chiddush. What's that other chiddush of maybe you weren't menayir yafa, you weren't mechasa yafa. That's something that Rebbe's not meshubah to. Rebbe doesn't hold it at, and it's for that reason that's not something Rebbe was concerned with. So just to explain Rabbi Yehuda's shita again, one more time. Again, Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you have a tipas chalav that falls on top of a chatichas basar, that's inside Kedera. The halacha is that we say Efshel l'soichtay aser, even if you ma'arav it, the tipas chalav remains inside the chatichas basar. In fact, chaticha atzma nasas nevela, we don't just see the tipas chalav as being eser, but we see the entire chaticha as being eser, and then the midilay batal, and as a result, the entire kedera is going to be eser. Those were the words of Rabbi Yehuda. What emerges is that that's pashut, that in the event that this person was not mina'ir the chatichas basar into the kedera, then of course this halacha wouldn't be true, because you could hold efshel l'soichtay aser chanan mim midilay batal, but if you're not ma'arav that chaticha together with the rest of the chatichas, so this is all a moot point. So the only time this is even a geya is if you were mena'ir it. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda holds that in the event that you were mena'ir, then the halacha is efshel l'soichtay aser chanan mim midilay batal. And Rabbi Yehuda himself didn't make a distinction between whether you were loy near betchila but you were menar lebesayf, or even if you were menar betchila besayf. As long as you were menar, the halacha is it's always going to be us. Now, if you were loy near betchila, you're near lebesayf, it's more pasha Rabbi Yehuda's halacha, because you were loy near betchila. So now the tipas chalav got absorbed in the chatichas basar. Efshel l'soichtay aser chanan mim midilay batal. So we menar later, it's all going to be aser. But even if you were menaret metchila, so as soon as the tipas chalav landed on the chatichas basar, at that point you were menaret. But emeloi near yafa, and it's for that reason the halacha is that even in that situation, this is all going to be aser. Rebbe said that I agree with Rabbi Yehuda in all the lamdas. The lamdis of efshel l'soichtay aser, I'm asking. The lamdis of Chanan, I'm asking. The lamdis of midilay batal, I'm asking. Where does Rebbe disagree? Where Rebbe disagree is he holds that in the case that you are menayer mitchila, like the Stam Mishnah on Kuf Chesem Aleph, there's no reason to assume emeloi near yafa, emeloi kisa yafa, and it's for that reason in that situation it is for sure going to be mutter. Either way, you see clearly the way the Gemara understands Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda holds efshel l'soichtay aser, which again is half the equation of kitanoi, that this shayl of efshel l'soichtay mutter aser being a machlokes tanam. Now we have to figure out the sheet of the chachamim. Amar for divrei chachamim kishnir v'kisa. Rabbi said that I agree with the chachamim in the event that you were near v'kisa, my kisa. What did Rabbi mean when he said that I hold like the chachamim that we look at the tipas chalav relative to everything in the ketera in the event that you are near v'kisa? Near b'sayf, near b'tchila. Does near v'kisa mean where you did near v'kisa at the end, but you didn't do near v'kisa b'tchila? V'kisa b'sayf again like kisa b'tchila can't be, because I'm near in Devi Rabbi Yehuda b'ha. Because Rabbi already said that in a situation when you were loy near b'tchila but you were near b'sayf, like kisa b'tchila but you were kisa b'sayf, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda, efshel l'soichtay aser chanan mim midilay batal. So you can't in the same breath say that in that situation he holds like the chacham. It's pashat. What does Rabbi mean when he says I hold like the chachamim where it's near v'kisa? What he means is near mitchila v'adsayf. V'kisa mitchila v'adsayf. What he means in the case you are menar right away, you are mechasa right away. So then you look at it relative to how much is in the Kedera, which, by the way, is what we mentioned earlier. That is Rebbe Shita. Rebbe Shita is that in as much as I hold efshel l'soichtay aser chanan and mim midilay batal, but if you were menaret right away, it all got mixed up. And being that it all got mixed up, so either you look at the tipas chalav relative to everything else that's going on in the Kedera. But the Gemara says if Rebbe said that I hold like the Chachamim in that case. Michlal, what do you see from this? The Rabbanon Savri, that the Rabbanon hold that near B'Seif or near B'Tchila. That in the event you were near B'Seif but you were not Minar B'Tchila, or Kisa B'Seif like Kisa B'Tchila, Mutter, the Allah is that even in that case would be Mutter. Meaning from the fact that Rebbe is saying that I hold like the Chachamim dafk in the case you were near B'Tchila and near B'Seif, that means that that means that the Chachamim themselves said their halacha, even when you were not near B'Tchila and near B'Seif. Meaning, even where you were loy near B'Tchila, but you were near B'Seif. You were loy Kisa B'Tchila, but you were Kisa B'Seif. Because if the Chacham only said their halacha when you're near B'Tchila and near B'Seif, it's not near in Divrei Chachamim in that case. That's the only time the Chachamim said their halacha. So Elamai, it's Muchach. Near in Divrei Chachamim when you're near B'Tchila and B'Seif, but the Chachamim themselves hold, even if you're loy near B'Tchila, as long as you're near B'Seif, that would be enough for their Shita. Why would that be the case? If you were lying near B'Tchila, so that means that the Tipas Chalav landed on the Chaticha. If it's able to be nice and tam, the Chaticha is Aser. Now the Chaticha is Nesarif together with the rest of the Ketera. It shouldn't be so pashit that it's all going to be mutter. So what's pshat in the Chachamim? Amakosavri must be because the Chachamim hold Efshel L'Seichtei mutter. I mean the Chachamim hold Efshel L'Seichtei mutter. So it's for that reason, if you're Menaira later, the Tipas Chalav comes out, and therefore I look at the Ketera relative to the Chaticha's Basar. So you see clearly that the sheet for the Chachamim is that Efshel L'Seichtei mutter. Rabbi Yehuda holds Efshel L'Seichtei Asner. The Chachamim hold Efshel L'Seichtei mutter. It's very, very clear then that this shaila of Efshel L'Seichtei mutter Asa, which we saw is a huge machlokes Ameiram on Kuf Ches Amid Aleph, Zok the Gemara Kitanoi. It's really machlokes Ameiram. It's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Says the Gemara. Amali Rav Achim Yidifti the Ravina. So Rav Achim Yidifti told Ravina, Mimayde be'Efshel L'Seichtei Pli. How do you know that the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in this brayso is whether or not Efshel L'Seichtei mutter aser. Dilma Efshel L'Seichtei divrei kol aser. Maybe really everybody holds that Efshel L'Seichtei is aser. V'hacha. So what's the machlokes? B'min b'minoi kom miflagi. Maybe the machlokes is whether min b'minoi is batal or min b'minoi is like batal. Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei da'amah min b'minoi like batal. Rabbi Yehuda's l'shitasi holds min b'minoi like batal. The Rabbanu l'tamayu and the Rabbanu l'shitasayu the Amriyu hold min b'minoi batal. That min b'minoi really is batal. Notice the Gemara says, I have another approach of how maybe you can understand the machlokes. Again, we said that it's muchach from Rebbe's commentary that the machlokes of Rebbe and the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is whether Efshel L'Seichtei Aser, Efshel L'Seichtei mutter. Says the Gemara, I have another suggestion. I want to say that everybody really holds that Efshel L'Seichtei is Aser. What's the machlokes? The machlokes is whether Mim B'Minoi is batal or whether Mim B'Minoi is loy batal. Das heißt, Rabbi Yehuda holds Mim B'Minoi loy batal, which is Rabbi Yehuda's shitasai. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita in Shas. Therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, if a tipas chalav falls on the chaticha, the halacha is, if it's nois and tam in the chaticha, Efshel L'Seichtei aser, chaticha atzma nasas nevela, Mim B'Minoi loy batal, the entire Ketera is going to be Asa. The Chachamim are Chaylik because the Chachamim hold that Mim B'Minoi is Batal. So Chachamim are going to tell you, I agree Efshel L'Seichtei Asa. I agree Chaticha Atzma Nasas Nevela. I just hold that Mim B'Minoi can be Batal. And when the Chachamim say Achetitein Tam Beroitev Ubekipa B'Chaticha, you know what that means? That just means that this new basar, which is aser, because Efshel L'Seichtei aser, I'll even tell you Chaticha Atzma Nasas Nevela. But maybe as long as it's able to be nice and tam into the rest of the Ketera, the halach is it's going to be aser. But if it's not nice and tam, it's going to be mutter, because even though it's a Mim B'Minoi is batal. How do you know that when the Chachamim say Achatitin Tam Beroit B'Kippur Chaticha, it means the Tipas Cholav relative to the rest of the Ketera? Maybe it means the whole Chaticha of Basar relative to the rest of the Ketera, because Enochinami Efshel L'Seichtei is Aser, and Chaticha Atzma Nasas Nevela, but Mim B'Minoi is Batal. So Mim B'Minoi is Batal as long as that Chaticha has the ability to be nice and tam. All the Chachamim said was Achatitin Tam Beroit B'Kippur Chaticha. The Gemara assumes it's the Tipas Chala being nice and tam. But how do you know it's the Tipas Chala being nice and tam? Maybe it's the entire Chaticha being nice and tam. And maybe the Nekudas HaMachloikis is whether Mim B'Minoi is Batal or Batal, which by the way is a Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim throughout Shas. So Amalei Rav Achim Yidifti the Ravina, how do you know the Machlokes is Efshel L'Seichtei mutter aser that the Gemara said Efshel L'Seichtei atzmei tanoi? Maybe the machlokes is not Efshel L'Seichtei aser, but maybe everybody knows Efshel L'Seichtei aser, and the machlokes is whether or not Mim B'Minoi is batal Or mim b'minoi is loy batal. But the Gemara says as follows. Hi, my. Iyamr b'shleimo d'Rabbana b'mim b'minoi. B'shleimo, if you're going to tell me that the Rabbanon, who usually argue with Rabbi Yehuda in the Sugya Mim B'minoi, Hachak Rabbi Yehuda Sfirulu, really hold like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning Bishlam, if you're going to tell me that the Machlokes here is not Mim B'minoi Batal Lei Batal, because everybody holds Mim B'minoi Lei Batal. Ube Efshelas Oichtei Pligi. So what's the Machlokes then? Whether Efshelas Oichtei is Mutter Aser? Do we look at the Tipas Chalav as being able to emerge or not able to emerge? Well, I know the Kamai Rebbe. Then I understand Rebbe, who said Nirin Divrei Rabbi Yehuda Baha v'Divrei Chachamim Baha. When Rebbe said Nirin Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, in the case of Loi Nir Betchila Aval Nir B'Saif, and he said Nirin Divrei Chachamim in the case where you're near Betchila U B'Saif, it stems perfectly well, per the way we explained it up until this point. The Chiddush is in the next line. But if you're going to tell me, but if you're going to tell me that everybody holds and the Machlik is over here is whether Mimimina is batal or not batal. Hai nirin divi Rabbi Yehuda, ve'ein nirin mi bayalei. What it should have said was not Rabbi holds nirin divi Rabbi Yehuda, bin loy nir, and nirin divrei chacham b'shenir. But what Rabbi Yehuda should have said was, or Rebbe should have said was, nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'shaloi nir, ve'ein nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'shenir. But it's not what he said. He said nirin divrei chacham b'shenir. And if that's the case, the machlokes must be efshel l'soich the mutter aser. The machlokes can't be whether mimba mina is batal or mimba mina is lo batal. So what does this mean? So what it means is as follows. If you hold that the machlokes is whether efshel l'soichta is mutter or efshel l'soichta is aser, so what emerges then is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the way the Gemara explained it, if you were near, whether you were near only b'saif or you were near betchila u b'saif, the halacha is you're always going to say that the entire k'teira is going to be aser. If you're only near b'saif, the chaticha becomes aser. Efshel l'soichtei aser, it doesn't go out when you mix it. Chanan mimimini batal, the entire k'teira is going to be aser. Even when you were menar betchila, imloi near yafa yafa, and it's for that reason it's going to be aser. The shnita of the chachamim is going to be that efshel l'soichtei is mutter. So for that reason, whether you were loy near betchila or near b'saif, and certainly if you were near betchila u b'saif, we are always going to look at the tipas chalav relative to the k'teira, because at the end of the day, once you menayer l'b'saif, for sure that's what it's going to be, and as long as the shishim connected it, it's going to be mutter. What does Rebbe say? Rebbe says, I hold be'etzem like Rabbi Yehuda, that efshel l'soich te'aser chanan and min b'mina le'batal, but I hold when you menayer it mitchila, there's no svara of emeloi near yafa yafa. So I hold shitas Rabbi Yehuda that the entire k'deir is aser if you will loy near betchila but you're near lebesayif, and I hold shitas chachamim that you look at the tipas cholav relative to the entire k'deir where you were near mitchila. If you were loy near mitchila, then you have problems. I hold like Rabbi Yehuda be'etzim when there's problems. If you're near mitchila, so then it's pashut. It's a tipas chol. It's the safe of the Mishnah on Kufches. It's pashut. It's a tipas chol relative to the rest of the kedera, and it's for that reason it's going to be okay. So ultimately, Rebbe holds the psak of Rabbi Yehuda, the entire kedera is also if you loy near mitchila, el near b'saif, and he holds the psak of the chachamim where you are near mitchila, which is that if the tipas chol could be nice and tam into the kedera, it's going to be aser. But if you have shishim between the right of the kippah and the in that instance, it's going to be mutter. If, however, you hold that be'etzim the chacham maskim to Rabbi Yehuda, that efshel l'soichtei aser, and that chatichatz menasas nevela, and that mimba mina loy, and that chatichatz menasas nevela, and the whole machlokes is merely whether mimba mina is batal or mimba mina is loibat. And when the chachamim say achetit in tam beroite bekiv bechatichas, what they mean is not the tipas chalav, because efshel soich is asa and chatichatz manas is available. But if the chatich is able to be nois and tam, then it's going to be asa. If the chatich is not able to be nois and tam, in that instance it's going to be mutter. Okay, so what then is the hachra of Rebbe? Rebbe is essentially saying that I hold like Rabbi Yehuda if you were loy near mitchila, near lebesayif. What does that mean? So that's the same Rebbe as in the first explanation of it. Rebbe holds be'etzem like Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, I hold efshel soichteasa chatichatz menasas nevela, which according to this version everybody holds. But I also hold like Rabbi Yehuda that mim b'mina is loy batal, and mim b'mina is loy batal. So if you're loy neir betchila, you're near lebesayif. So that's for that reason the entire k'teira is going to be aser. If, however, you were near betchila, so over there, what do I hold? Over there, I hold that I'm not worried, emaloi near yafa, and therefore what? I look at the tipas chalav relative to the k'ter. In other words, I hold like the chachamim. Is that the sheet of the chachamim? It's not the sheet of the chachamim. The sheet of the chachamim is not that I look at the tipas chalav relative to the k'ter. When the chachamim were chaylik in Rabbi Yehuda, if you hold that they agree, efshel l'soich deyasa chanan, but they hold mimim midolei batel, what are you looking at? You're looking at the chaticha relative to the k'ter, not the tipas chalav relative to the k'ter. They just hold mimim midolei batel. So just because you were menayra later, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean you can't have bittel, because mimim midolei is batel. If that's the case, then when Rebbe says nir and divrei chachamim kishenir mitchil, he's not really saying the sheet of the chachamim. The sheet of the chachamim is I look at the chaticha relative to the chatichas. Rebbe is saying I look at the tipas chalav relative to the chatichas. That's not shitas hachachamim. Nir and divrei Rabbi Yehuda kishaloi nir betchila el b'soif. That's a true statement. But nir and divrei chachamim b'shenir betchila, it's not true. That is not the sheet of the chachamim. If the sheet of the chachamim is efshel l'soichtei mutter, and I look at the tipas chalav relative to the kedera, even when you were near betchila, Zok Rebbe, I agree with that where it was near betchila. I hold shitas chachamim of tipa relative to kedera if you were near betchila. But if even the chachamim don't hold that, the chachamim shita was I look at the chaticha relative to the chatichas where it was near betchila al b'sayf. So when Rebbe says nir in divrei chachamim, in the case where you were near betchila, the Chacham never said in the case that you're near betchila, the halach is you look at the tipas chalav relative to the k'ter. Just to add one knech. A vifel Rabbi Yehuda's shita in the sugya is that just like loy near betchila ella b'soif, the halach is we say emaloi near yafa, and therefore efshel l'soich deyasa chanan and mimim midolei batel. So it makes sense then, according to Chacham, you would say the same thing. Because if the nekudas hamachloikis between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is whether mimim is batel, mimim is like batel, so you can't be marbin the machloikis. They're not arguing efshel l'soich, they're not arguing chanan, they're only arguing mimim like batel. Point is, just like Rabbi Yehuda holds emeloi near yafa, the Chacham are also going to hold emeloi near yafa. So the shit of the Chachamim is going to be sai where you were loy near betchila lebesayif, and sai where you were near betchila and you were near lebesayif. I'm going to look at not the tipas chalav relative to the k'teira, but I'm going to look at the chatichas basa relative to the k'teira. And that's not what Rebbe said. Rebbe said nir in divrei Chachamim bin near betchila b'soif. The whole yisod is because he doesn't hold of a chashash emeloi near yafa. Well, if that's the case, what should the halacha be? The halacha should be the tipas chalav relative to the basa, and that's not the sheet of the Chachamim. So what should Rebbe have said? What Rebbe should have said is that nir in divrei Rabbi Yehuda kishaloi near betchila al b'soif ve'ein nir in divrei Rabbi Yehuda kishenir betchila b'soif. That's not what he said. He said, Nir and Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Nir and Divrei Chachamim. Vaisa is the Chachamim hold it's a tipas chalav relative. If it's a tipas chalav relative, and we know the Chachamim said their halacha, Saif was near betchila b'soif, and Saif was loy near betchila ala b'soif, must be it's because they hold efshel l'soich their mutter. I know Rabbi Yehuda holds efshel l'soich their no other way to learn Rabbi Yehuda. And I know that the Chachamim hold efshel l'soich their mutter. If that's the case, must be it's a machlokes tanam, and the Gemara says, V'su loy midei. There's nothing else to discuss on this topic. It's pashut that this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is not mimimina batel, mimimina batel, but rather it's efshel l'soich the mutter, efshel l'soich the yaser. That machlokes amiram that we had in Amud Aleph is really a machlokes tanan. Either way, moving along to the much lighter second part of today's daf, which is very much going to segue into tomorrow's daf. So the Mishnah, hakal, the udders of an animal, koiroi, you have to tear, umoitzias chalvoi, and you have to remove its milk. Like karai, if you didn't do that, you're not going to be over. Halev, as it relates to the heart of the animal, kaira, you have to tear it open, umoitzias damei, and remove its blood. Like karai, if you didn't tear it open and you didn't remove its blood, you're not going to be over. So this Mishnah talks about two of the body parts of an animal. The chal, the udders, and the lev, the heart. The reason these are unique in the sugis of Chulin is because the chal is where the milk of the animal is. The heart is an area that has a disproportionate amount of blood. As a result, the chal poses a unique bas of a chal of shaila, and the heart poses a unique dam shaila. The Mishnah says that lechatchila, before you cook and then eat the chal, you should tear it open, remove the milk. If you didn't do it, einoi over olive. We'll see more about that in the Gemara. The heart, lechatchila, you should tear open and remove the blood. If you didn't do that, einoi over olive. Now Rashi says that as it relates to the second part of the Mishnah, halev koiroi umoitzi es damai. But if you didn't do that, einoi over olive, the Gemara Krisos daf chaf bezam and aleph makes an akimta. It's talking about where this animal was an oif. The heart of an oif is very small, so the dam that would be there would be pachas mikazayas dam. Being that there's so little dam there, it's for that reason einoi overall. But if it was a behema, for example, where you would assume there is a kazayas of dam, then you really would be over. So as it relates to the chal, so there's this kula that if you didn't tear out the chal and remove the blood, remove the chalav, the halach is einoi over olav. But as it relates to the heart, really you would be over. The only reason in the Mishnah you're not being over is because we're making an akimta that it's talking about an oif. But to the extent that it was talking about a behema, over there would be a problem. And really the entire balance of the daf is going to focus on what Rab Zera said in the name of Rab. We'll see two versions in what he said, two lashonos. So Rab Zera Amar Rav, einoi over olav, as it relates to the chal, that you didn't tear open, you didn't remove the chalav, and the Mishnah said einoi over olav. What it means is einoi over olav. You're not going to be over the isabas of chal medei rice. I mean, if you cooked it, you're not over this bishul. If you ate it, you're not over this rachilo. However, not only are you not over, umutter lechatchila. If you want to go ahead and eat it, this is something that you would be allowed to do. Now, if you take a look at Rashi says in bishla, it's talking about if you cooked it. We'll see really more in tomorrow's daf that bishloi doesn't really mean bishul, in the first place on the Amid, but what it means is if you roasted it. So if you went ahead and you roasted it, then you would even be allowed to eat it. If you cook it, it could be it's a problem. Because it could be if you cook it, the milk gets absorbed in a much more profound way into the chal, and at that point, if you would eat it, it would be a problem. But einoi over olav, says Reb Zera in the name of Rav, mutter, even if you went ahead and you roasted it. Says the Gemara, how could you say that? The Mishnah said, V'nantanan einoi over olav. What does it sound like from the Mishnah? That if somebody would go ahead and not tear open the chal and remove the chalav, you wouldn't be over olav. It sounds like mi'aver hudalayavar ha'yisurik. It sounds like you're only not going to be over, you're not going to get malchus, but in Issa you're going to get. So the Gemara says, no, but din hu the yisurin nami like. Really, there's no Issa. So why did it say einoi over olav? You're saying good, say better. You should say it's mutal lechatchilav. I did the boilam is seifa, because we wanted to say in the seifa the Mishnah halev korim moitzi as damai, that the lev you have to tear open and remove the dam. Loi kared, let's say you didn't tear it open, einoi over olav, and hasam over there mi'aver hudalayavar ha isura ikka. Over there you're not going to be over, but over there you are going to be over an isser. So tananami reishe einoi over olav. We said the same lashon over here of einoi over olav, meaning the lashon of einoi over olav in the seifa is dafka, because it's taka only einoi over olav. For sure you're going to be over an isser. So being that we wanted to use the lashon of einoi over olav in the seifa, so to be consistent, poetic symmetry over halachic accuracy, we used it in the Reisha as well. But in the Reisha, it's not only einoi over olav, but it's actually going to be mutal lechatchila. Says the Gemara, I think I have a raya to what Reb Zera said in the name of Rav. Again, what do you say in the name of Rav? That even though the Mishnah says that you have to tear open the chal, remove the milk before you cook it, roast it, eat it, but if you didn't do it, and then you roasted it, and you ate it, it's going to be mutter. Says the Gemara, I think I have a raya, hakchal, you have to tear it and remove its milk. Like kar, if you didn't do it, any over olive, you're not over. Halev, the heart, kari might say damai. Like kar, if you didn't tear it, then after you cook it, or we're going to exchange the word bishul again for tzli, or after you roasted it, then you have to tear it, and it's going to be okay to eat. Now, what does it sound like? Lev hu dabai kriya, dafka the heart. If you already went ahead and you roasted it, you would have to tear it. Avol kachal, as it relates to the kachal, loy ba'i kriya. It sounds like then you wouldn't have this halacha, right? This brisa is discussing the halachas of the kachal and the halachas of the leiv, and it adds one leg in its discussion of the leiv that it didn't mention in the kachal. Hakachal koira yumoitzias chalavai, loy koira enei over olav, which we know is an ambiguous term. Haleiv koira yumoitzias damai, loy koira. Then That last piece that after you roasted it, you would have to tear it open to pull it out. It only says by the lave. It doesn't say by the chal. It sounds like as it relates to the chal, you don't need it. But the Gemara says, I don't think there's a dia, because you know what I can tell you? Dilma, just the opposite. Lave with the sagi lave kriya. Maybe dafka, the lave, if you want afterwards, you can tear it open and eat it. Aval chal, but as relates to the chal, it could be once you cook it, the chalav gets embedded into the chal, and if you would tear it open and you would try to remove it, it wouldn't be okay. So you have no raya from the fact that the brisa doesn't say after you cooked it or roasted it, you can tear it open and pull it out. Because maybe the reason it didn't say it is not because who cares. No, because it's not going to help. Just the opposite. Some had an exact opposite version of Reb Zeir Merav. Reb Zeir Merav, that as it relates to the chal that you didn't tear open, you're not over if you ate it. Abavas, you're not allowed to eat it. I have a raya from the Mishnah. So what was a kasha in the first lishna is a raya in the second lishna. The Mishnah said, it sounds you're only not over, but there is going to be an isra. The Gemara says no. But could be there's no isra. The only reason we mention this nusach is agav the seifa, but don't prove anything from here, because it could be we're mentioning this lashon for poetic symmetry, not for halachic accuracy. Tashma, I'll bring you a raya from Brisa, the same Brisa we mentioned a second ago. The chal, you have to tear open and remove its chalav. Like karev, let's say you didn't do that. Any you're not going to be ever. Halev, as it relates to the heart, karev might say it's damai. You have to tear it and remove its blood. Like karev, if you didn't do it, you can go ahead and tear it after the bishul. Umutter, it's going to be mutter. Says the Gemara, lev hu dabay kriya. It sounds like dafka the lev requires kriya. Aval chal, as it relates to chal, loy bay kriya. And if that's the case, it's a kasha. You're telling me that it's going to be aser if you didn't tear it open. What do you mean? The lev you see you have to tear open, but the chal you don't have to. The Gemara says, no, Dilma, it's not a kasha, it's a raya. Dilma levu the sagi leve kriya. As it relates to the lev, you could do a kriya. Avokadli sagi leve kriya. Over there, you can't do a kriya. Again, it's the inverse of the previous Gemara. There's no kasha from here. If anything, could be it's even a raya. So the Gemara Tanya Kalishna Kamad Rav, a brisa that supports the first lishna of Rav. Again, that what? That if you didn't tear open the chal, the halacha is you are not going to be over nisa deiraisa, and it's even going to be mutter. Chal shebishloi bechelboi, mutter is going to be mutter. Keva shebishloi bechelboi. What about the keva, the abamazim of the animal? If you cooked it together with the chalav, aser, it's going to be aser. Ma hefresh bein zelos. What's the difference between the two things? Zeh konas b'meyav, zeh in konas b'meyav. The milk that's inside the stomach is actually more konus, it's more eingezapt, and it's for that reason over there it's going to be aser, as opposed to what's in the chal is going to be mutter. But the bottom line is, you see mafurish that it's going to be mutter, and this is a raya to the first lishna of Rav. One last Gemara, Ketzad Kairei. So the Mishnah talks about tearing open the chal, tearing open the lave. How exactly do you go about doing that? Rav Yehuda said, Kairei shesi ve'erev. You do it like a cross, a vertical line and a horizontal line. But then you squeeze the chal against the kaisel, you make all the chalav come out. Amalei Rabbi Lazar told this Gabbai, Krali, I want you to tear open the chal, vani echol, and I'm going to eat it. Says the Gemara, my kamashal masnisani. What's the chiddush? Why are you telling this to me? Isn't it a chiddush? Hakamash blond loy be'inon shesi ve'erev v'tachu b'kaisel. The Gemara's significance is Rabbi Lazar just told us just tear it. He didn't tell him make a shesi ve'erev. He said tear it. I don't care how you tear it, as long as you cut it open. That in of itself is going to be okay. And if that's the case, it's a raya, not like what we just said. You don't have to make a shesi ve'erev from this meiser rav that took place with Rabbi Lazar. You see, as long as you open it in some way, shape, or form, that in and of itself is going to be okay.